Hello class, this is Professor Joseph Holbrook. This is our course is REL 2011, Methods of Analysis of Religious Studies. And today we're beginning Chapter 2, which has to do with ways of studying religion. So let's begin. A person studying a subject cannot appeal to evidence that is unavailable to others. So when we're studying religious studies, we use social science approaches. This is not theology. Theology also is a science. It's a science, the study of God, but theology begins with certain presuppositions that religious studies cannot afford to do. So religious studies must take the same kind of presuppositions that social sciences such as sociology and anthropology also embrace, which means the appeal to evidence that is available to others, that is replicable. A second rule of academic scholarship is that a study should involve some sort of critical analysis. On the right there you see an image of the Codex Sinaiticus from the 4th century of the Common Era. One tool that is used in religious studies for the study of religion is literary criticism. So some of the questions that literary criticism asks is it a version or a translation of a more original and reliable text? Who was the author? When was the text composed? Where was it written and to what audience? What was the author's specific purpose? What types or genres of literature are used by the writers? How was the work received, edited, interpreted, and passed on? A couple more tools in the toolbox for religious studies is historiography and anthropology. In historiography, the historian of religion must be responsible to select from a vast array of possible sources, and of course the selection process has to have some kind of criteria or rationale behind it. In historiography, the historian selects the accounts or the evidence that she or he deems appropriate and relevant based on some principles of choice. The choice of the relevant data will depend in a large part on the kinds of questions the historian decides to pursue. Some of these questions are the same as those that occupy the literary scholar. Who wrote what, when, why, and to whom? However, there's a very different approach depending on which branch of history that you are working in. A Marxist historian, for example, would focus on sources that primarily deal with economics and class. A social historian would deal with the society, sources that tell us about the everyday life of the average person in the society. A cultural historian might focus more on interpretations, myths, symbols, and interpretation of meaning. And finally, a gender historian might focus on the category of gender, or may focus on women in early Islam or women in early Christianity and their role. Anthropology has to do with the study of human beings and societies, viewed primarily as both the creators and the creations of culture. Religious institutions and practices are found in every known culture. Therefore, religion is of great interest to most anthropologists. Religious ideas and behaviors shape and in turn are shaped by family, organization, the economic system, law, and politics. Anthropologists recognize that religion is an especially powerful factor. Often anthropologists are focused on pre-literate cultures, whether that is in the current time, contemporary cultures that are pre-literate in the Amazon basin, for example, or ancient civilizations that were pre-literate. Sociology is extremely similar to anthropology, but there are some subtle differences. The sociology of religion, like anthropology, focuses its attention on the social behavior and the way in which religion interacts with other dimensions of our social experience. Sociology is generally concerned with the religious life of modern, developed, and literate societies, complex modern societies. Early in the 20th century, there was a great flowering of interest in religion by eminent sociologists. So a sociologist would be more inclined to study complex urban societies, modern societies, and they may use very different tools. Where the anthropologist might do participant observation and take copious notes in a small village, the sociologist might use sophisticated survey techniques and quantitative analysis of data, statistics in other words. Here are several giants of the social science studies of religion in the early 20th century. William James was a psychologist and philosopher at Harvard University who wrote varieties of religious experience. Max Weber was a German social scientist and was the father of sociology and political science, at least considered so by some. Sigmund Freud was a psychologist who revolutionized the field, and we have already seen that his definition of religion is somewhat prejudicial, that religion is like a childhood neurosis. And then there's Carl Jung, who was whose body of work, his methodology is much more friendly to religious studies. Carl Jung developed the idea of the archetypes and the collective unconscious. It's very important how we go about interpreting and explaining religion. These two topics frequently pit scholars in the humanistic interpretive disciplines, that is, literary, historical, and phenomenological studies, against those in the social sciences, anthropology, psychology, sociology, etc. The perspective of an outside observer has certain advantages. One might be able to be more detached, less biased, but also has some disadvantages. As an outside observer, you're less aware of the inner motivations of the believer or the practitioner of the faith. So therefore, when one is pursuing an analysis, you have to decide if you're going to try to detach yourself as an outside observer, or if you're going to try to get on the inside and have an insider's understanding and empathy and view of the phenomenon that you're studying. It's important to understand the process of interpretation and also the role of explanation. Hermeneutics is the art or science of interpretation. In Greek, it means to interpret. In contrast to exegesis, hermeneutics concerns itself with the preconditions that make understanding possible. A specific hermeneutics involves the particular preconditions that are necessary to understand a distinctive text. Any human meaning must first of all be understood in its own terms from within. So if you're studying the life of Amish people in Pennsylvania and you want to interpret some of their discourse, you have to have a thorough understanding of the Amish perspective of reality to be able to interpret them. There's two kinds of reductionism. There is descriptive reductionism and explanatory reduction. Descriptive reduction is simply a failure to identify an emotion, practice, or experience under the description by which the subject identifies it. To describe a religious experience in non-religious terms is to misdescribe it. A possible legitimate explanatory reduction, however, might involve offering an explanation of an experience in social terms such as sociological, for example, or psychological, that are not those of the subject and might not meet with his or her approval. So in this case, what we need is very thick, thorough description, detailed. We do not want to reduce the description, but with explanations, it's always necessary to do some kind of reductionism. There could be 5 or 6 different explanations of a particular individual's conversion to a new faith. but in order to get a clear and simple explanation, you have to eliminate as many as possible. So it becomes very important that the student maintain a commitment to objectivity in the field of religious studies. Regardless of one's own personal faith commitments, those have to be bracketed or set aside, and the student must be able to study other religions without prejudice or bias, or at least to be very honest about the biases up front. A basic question that we all must face involving the selection and interpretation of data is the relation between the scholar's own beliefs and scholarly objectivity. And so that is a very brief introduction to Chapter 2, Ways of Studying Religion. We will continue next week with Chapter 3. Good luck on the test.